My name is Cassandra Wilson, but everyone calls me Cassie. I am 34 years old, and last Tuesday my entire life changed with the flicker of a television screen. Six numbers drawn in a sequence I had never expected to see together altered everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, and the way the world really works. I had won the lottery, $47 million. The moment I checked the ticket, my hands began to tremble. At first, I thought it was a mistake that I had misread a number or that my eyes were playing tricks on me. But the truth was undeniable, the numbers matched perfectly. The jackpot was mine, and yet instead of rushing to celebrate, I sat frozen in my tiny apartment, staring at that slip of paper as though it had the power to burn me. And in a way it did. Most people imagine that winning the lottery means freedom, quitting your job, buying a dream house, traveling the world. But in that quiet moment, as the reality sank in, I made a decision that shocked even me. I would tell no one. Not my mother, not my father, not my sister or brother, not even Charlotte, my best friend, and the only person who had never let me down. The decision wasn't born from greed, it was born from memory, from scars, from betrayal that still ached in places too deep to name. You see, money had always been complicated in my family. My parents divorced when I was 14 and both remarried quickly. My father, Gregory, married Stephanie, a real estate agent, who liked designer handbags and vacations in Cancun. My mother, Diane, remarried Warren, a successful business owner, who held his wallet tighter than his embrace. I had two siblings, Lisa, the golden child with the Ivy League degree and the surgeon husband, and Jason, the charming drifter who turned borrowing money into an art form. Money was always the silent weight at the dinner table. My brother's calls for help, Lisa's requests that never ended in repayment, my parents' loans that somehow turned into gifts. Every time I helped them, it cost me my savings, my security, my peace. And every time I needed even the smallest comfort in return, silence answered me. So when the winning numbers appeared before my eyes, I didn't feel joy. I felt dread. Dread of what they would do to me if they knew. Dread of how quickly love could become entitlement and how fast gratitude could rot into resentment. I spent that night researching stories of other winners, and what I found terrified me. Families torn apart, friendships destroyed, fortunes lost within 5 years. The lottery, one article said, wasn't a blessing but a curse, the fastest way to lose everything you love. By sunrise, I had made my choice. I would protect myself. I would keep the money secret. I would build a wall so high no one could climb over it. Even if it meant living two lives, the struggling accountant by day and the hidden millionaire by night. But secrets have weight, and silence has a way of gnawing at your chest until it becomes unbearable. I told myself I could live with it, but then another thought slipped into my mind, one I couldn't shake. What if I tested them? What if I found out who in my family would help me if I were truly desperate? Not because they stood to gain, but because they loved me. It sounds cruel, doesn't it? Manipulative. But after years of being used and discarded, I needed to know. I needed proof. So I came up with a plan. I would tell each family member the same story, that the marketing firm where I worked had suddenly shut down, that I had lost my job, that I had no paycheck coming, and that medical bills had drained the little savings I had left. Then I would ask them for help, not a fortune, just $5,000. Enough to be significant, enough to sting, but not impossible. I rehearsed the words in front of the mirror, softening my voice until it cracked in just the right places. I practiced with Charlotte, who frowned and told me she thought I was playing with fire. Maybe I was, but I couldn't let it go. I wanted to know who would still stand beside me when I had nothing to offer but myself. The first call I made was to my mother. Diane always painted herself as the martyr, the mother who had sacrificed her dreams for her children. If anyone would help me, I thought it would be her. My hands shook as I dialed her number. When she picked up, her voice was distracted. Half listening as I spilled out the carefully crafted story of my job loss and mounting bills. She gasped in sympathy, but when I asked for help, her voice hardened. "Oh, honey, you know Warren and I just put a down payment on the lake house. Things are tight right now. Maybe you should ask your father or Lisa. Paul makes good money." I swallowed my disappointment. She promised to talk to Warren, but we both knew how that would end. I hung up, sat in silence, and wrote the truth in my journal. She would not help me. The next day, I tried my father. I met him in a coffee shop thinking a public place might soften his response. It didn't. He listened expressionless until I asked for help. Then he launched into a lecture about financial responsibility, about how he had always told me to save 6 months of expenses, about how this was a learning experience. Not once did he offer a dime. He patted my hand with the condescension of a man who believed his words were worth more than his actions. "This will be good for you, Cassandra," he said. "Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom." Rock bottom. That was what he saw when he looked at me. I held back tears as I left the cafe, but inside something cracked. Not the mask I wore for him, but something deeper, the illusion that my father had ever truly been on my side. And so it went. One by one, I approached them. My sister Lisa, who had once begged me for help with her wedding, looked at me with wide eyes and genuine pity until I mentioned the number. Then she shifted uncomfortably, muttering about tuition and bathroom renovations. Jason, my brother, didn't even pretend. He ignored my calls, my texts, my pleas, the same way he had ignored his promises to pay me back in the past. Each rejection carved another wound. Each excuse confirmed what I had always feared, that when I needed them, they would not be there. My stepmother, Stephanie, didn't even bother to sugarcoat it. When I called her, her voice was brisk, almost impatient. "Cassandra, I'm sorry, but Warren and I are not in a position to help you. Perhaps this is an opportunity for you to learn better financial management skills." She even had the audacity to suggest I take on a roommate or move to a cheaper apartment, as though my entire life could be downsized to fit her version of responsibility. I reminded her gently that I had once helped them with cabin repairs when they claimed money was tight. She bristled at the memory, dismissing it with, "That was different. That was a family property that benefits everyone. Everyone except me." I thought bitterly, since I had been invited to use that cabin only once in 5 years. But nothing cut deeper than Warren himself. When I called my stepfather, his words were as cold and final as a slammed door. "You are not my daughter. Your financial problems are your own." That was it. No sympathy, no hesitation, no kindness. Just rejection wrapped in cruelty. By then I was numb. The people who had taken from me without hesitation, who had leaned on me in their moments of crisis, could not extend even the smallest hand when I asked for help. And then came Ryan, my cousin. He had always been unreliable, the kind of person who made promises that dissolved the moment they were spoken. At first he surprised me. He offered to meet for lunch, said he'd bring a check. For a fleeting moment I felt hope. But on the day we were supposed to meet, he canceled with a last-minute text claiming something had come up. After that silence, he stopped answering my calls altogether. Aunt Heather wasn't any better. When I explained my supposed crisis, she clucked her tongue and launched into a smug speech about how she had always told my father I should have taken a more respectable job at the bank after college. She made my desperation into proof of her foresight, gossiping about my irresponsibility to anyone who would listen. By evening, I learned through Lisa that Heather was already spreading my story as a cautionary tale, painting me as the reckless, desperate niece who came begging for handouts. I can't explain the kind of exhaustion that followed. It wasn't just disappointment. It was betrayal laced with humiliation. I had tested them, yes, but the results cut deeper than I had prepared for. 7 people, all of whom had leaned on me, all of whom I had helped in moments of need, had failed me. One by one, they revealed themselves. I was sitting alone one night staring at my journal where I had carefully written each response when my phone rang. The name lit up the screen: Aunt Martha. "Cassie, honey, I just heard from your mother about the job. Are you okay?" Her voice was warm, gentle, threaded with genuine concern. I hadn't even reached out to her yet. She was calling because she had heard secondhand, because she cared enough to act. The lump in my throat made it hard to speak. "I'm hanging in there," I said, and for the first time in days the emotion in my voice wasn't rehearsed. She insisted we meet the next day. At the diner near her apartment, she hugged me tight before we sat down. She asked thoughtful questions, not out of nosiness, but out of care. When the plates were cleared, she reached into her purse and slid an envelope across the table. "I want you to take this. It's $3,000. I know it's not the full amount, but it should help." I stared at her, stunned. $3,000 for a woman who lived paycheck to paycheck, who drove a car that threatened to break down every other week, who lived modestly without complaint. Martha, I can't take this. It's too much, I whispered. Nonsense. Family helps family. And if you need a place to stay, my sofa pulls out. It's not fancy, but you'd be welcome as long as you need. Tears blurred my vision. In that moment, she had given me more than money. She had given me proof that love still existed in this family, proof that I wasn't invisible or unworthy. Later, when I learned that the 3,000 she gave me represented nearly all her savings and that she had been quietly struggling with diabetes, picking up extra tutoring work to cover her medical bills, the weight of her generosity hit me like a blow. She had so little, and yet she gave me almost everything she had. The contrast between Martha and the rest of the family was unbearable. My mother had just renovated a bathroom. Lisa had bought a new car. Heather never stopped flaunting her wealth. And yet the only one who stepped forward was Martha, the one who had the least to give. That night, I invited her over for tea. She sat on my worn couch, looking tired but calm, and I knew I couldn't lie to her anymore. Martha, I said softly, I need to tell you something. I haven't been completely honest with you. She tilted her head, her expression open. What is it, honey? I didn't lose my job. The company is fine. I made up the story to see who in the family would help me. She was quiet, her eyes thoughtful. For a moment, I feared I had ruined everything, that she would see me as manipulative or cruel, but finally she nodded. I see. I'm not angry, maybe sad. Sad that you felt you needed to test people this way. But I understand. Our family hasn't always been kind to you. Her words cracked something inside me. The dam broke. You were the only one, Martha. The only one who offered to help. Everyone else had excuses or just ignored me. She sighed softly. People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient. She was right. And in that moment, I realized I owed her more than gratitude. I owed her the truth. There's something else, I said, my voice trembling. I didn't just lie about my job. I've been keeping a bigger secret. I won the lottery 3 weeks ago. $47 million. And you're the first person I'm telling. Her eyes widened, but she didn't gasp, didn't recoil, didn't demand anything. She simply reached for my hand and held it. Oh, Cassie, that's life-changing. I understand why you kept it to yourself. I swallowed, hard tears running down my face. I needed to know who cared about me without knowing about the money. And now I do. Martha's hand was warm against mine, grounding me in a way no one else ever had. She didn't ask about the numbers, didn't lean forward with greedy eyes, didn't start making suggestions about how I should spend it. She simply sat there steady and kind and whispered, I'm glad you trusted me with this. But Cassie, what matters most isn't the money. It's what you do with it and how you let it shape you. Her words stayed with me long after she left that night. For the first time since my numbers came up, I didn't feel suffocated by the secret. Someone knew. And not just anyone, someone who had proven her love without hesitation, someone who gave from her emptiness when others had clutched their abundance to their chests. The next few days blurred together in a haze of thought. I couldn't stop comparing the faces of my family members. When I asked for help, the quick flicker of discomfort in Lisa's eyes, the cold dismissal in Warren's tone, the way Jason disappeared altogether. And then, Martha sliding an envelope across the diner table with trembling hands, saying, "Family helps family." The contrast was unbearable, but it was also clarifying. I met with Philip, my lawyer, and told him I wanted to set up something permanent for Martha. A trust, I said firmly. One that will cover her medical expenses, her retirement, everything. But it has to be subtle, she's proud. I don't want her to feel like she's being given charity. Philip smiled knowingly. We can structure it so it looks like a family fund. She won't have to manage a lump sum. She'll simply receive a monthly stipend enough to live comfortably. I nodded, relief washing through me. And I want to buy her a house. Something small, single-story, accessible. Nothing extravagant, just safe. We spent hours drawing up plans. But even with all the legal talk, all the financial strategies, my mind kept circling back to one truth: I couldn't go on pretending forever. The family already whispered about me, about my supposed failures, my irresponsibility, my so-called desperation. The lies I had woven for the test had turned into gossip, a narrative spreading like wildfire. If I stayed silent, they'd define me forever by that lie. And though I had no intention of revealing the lottery win, I couldn't let them keep their distorted version of me alive. So I called for a family meeting. The responses were hesitant, but curiosity or maybe suspicion pulled them all in. On Sunday afternoon, my small apartment filled with the very people who had failed me. My mother and Warren arrived first, Warren's jaw tight as though he was doing me a favor by showing up. My father followed Stephanie glued to his side, her sharp eyes scanning my modest living room with disapproval. Lisa and Paul arrived together, their polished smiles thin rehearsed. Jason slipped in last, looking uncomfortable, his eyes darting everywhere except mine. Aunt Heather entered with her usual air of superiority, as if she were gracing us with her presence. And finally Martha. She slipped in quietly, gave me a secret smile and sat in the corner, her presence steadying me like an anchor. I stood before them, heart pounding, but for the first time I wasn't afraid. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I know there have been rumors about my financial situation and I wanted to set the record straight." Murmurs passed through the room. My mother shifted uneasily. Jason stared at his phone. "The truth is," I continued, "I'm fine. I've accepted a new position, one that pays better and offers better benefits. I'll be transitioning soon." Relief washed over their faces, almost comically so. My mother smiled as if she had been holding her breath for weeks. Lisa let out a soft laugh. Even Jason looked up briefly, his shoulders loosening. But then my father leaned forward, his voice sharp. "So why all the drama about needing money? Why go around asking everyone for help if you had something lined up?" I met his gaze evenly, because at the time I didn't know if I would make it. And when I needed help, I reached out to my family. Isn't that what family is for? The silence that followed was heavy. Stephanie crossed her arms defensively. "It's not always possible to help even when you want to," she said quickly. "We all have our own financial commitments." "Of course," I agreed softly. "We all choose what to prioritize." I let my eyes travel slowly across the room before landing on Jason. "Speaking of priorities, Jason, I noticed you didn't respond to any of my messages, not even to say no. Yet last Christmas you asked me for $3,000 for your rent." I didn't hesitate. "But when I needed you, you vanished." His face flushed red. He muttered something about being in a rough place, but I didn't let him off the hook. "A phone call costs nothing," I reminded him. The room shifted uncomfortably. Lisa avoided my eyes. Paul cleared his throat. My mother bit her lip. I didn't yell, didn't cry, I simply laid their actions bare like holding up a mirror. And the reflection was ugly. Excuses poured out of them, tuition, retirement, vacations, tight budgets. They twisted their failures into justifications, trying to make me feel guilty for even asking. Not one of them admitted the truth that helping me had simply not been worth the inconvenience. By the time they began filing out their faces tight with discomfort, I felt strangely light. I hadn't revealed my secret fortune. I hadn't sought revenge or demanded apologies. But I had done something more powerful. I had stripped away their illusions, and in doing so freed myself from theirs. When the last door shut, Martha stayed behind to help me clear the empty coffee cups. She looked at me with quiet pride. "You did well," she said softly. "That couldn't have been easy." I sank into a chair, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It was easier than I thought, I admitted. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of disappointing them, because I realized they never saw me clearly anyway. Martha smiled gently. "That's a powerful realization. So, what happens next?" I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel lost. I felt certain. "Next, we start looking for houses. For both of us." 1 year later, my life was unrecognizable from the day those 6 numbers aligned and shattered. Everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. I had moved into a modest but beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't flashy. It was mine. A garden stretched behind the house, bursting with flowers. I planted myself colors that greeted me each morning like an embrace. For the first time in years, I woke up without the weight of bills crushing my chest, without the gnawing panic of what if circling my every thought. And just 3 blocks away stood Martha's new home. A small, single-story craftsman, sturdy and sunlit with wide doorways to make her days easier when her legs ached and her walker was needed. Seeing her there safe and comfortable was like healing a wound I hadn't even known I carried. Together, we built something bigger than ourselves. The nonprofit I started born out of Martha's example. Her sacrifices, her quiet strength grew faster than I dreamed possible. We called it Second Family. Its mission was simple but profound: to support elderly people living alone, especially those abandoned or neglected by their families. We provided companionship meals, small repairs, and financial assistance. In just the first year, we had touched over 200 lives. Every time I looked into the eyes of an old woman clutching a grocery bag she hadn't been able to carry herself, or a widower who confessed he hadn't spoken to anyone in days until our volunteers knocked on his door, I thought of Martha. She was the heartbeat of it all, the proof that love didn't come from abundance, but from selflessness. Charlotte eventually joined me, stepping away from her nursing job to help run outreach. Her compassion filled the spaces I couldn't, and together we created something that felt like redemption. On Friday evenings, we still sat together with glasses of wine, only now it was on my back patio, laughter spilling into the night without the bitter aftertaste of exhaustion. As for my family, things changed, though not in the ways they might have hoped. I kept my distance, but not completely. There were still holiday gatherings, polite birthday calls, the occasional dinner. But the pretense had dissolved. I no longer strained to earn their approval, no longer bled myself dry trying to prove my worth. The boundaries I once lacked were now firm. They still didn't know about the lottery. To them, I had simply found success in nonprofit work, and they seemed to accept that narrative without much curiosity. Perhaps it was easier for them to believe I had stumbled onto a respectable career than to confront the truth of what they had revealed when I tested them. There were temptations, of course. Times when Jason called, his voice slick with desperation, asking for just a small loan for his latest venture. Times when Lisa sighed dramatically about the cost of her kitchen renovation, her words baiting me for sympathy. Each time the urge rose like a tide inside me, the temptation to reveal the truth, to throw their failures in their faces, to show them the fortune they had turned their backs on. But I didn't. Because I remembered the silence, the excuses, the gossip. And remembering made the choice simple. Interestingly, I still helped them, just not in the way they ever knew. When my father had a minor heart attack, I quietly paid his hospital bills through the patient assistance program. When Ryan finally checked himself into rehab, I anonymously covered part of the cost. These acts weren't about them anymore. They were about me, about refusing to let their failures harden me into something bitter, about proving to myself that kindness could exist without strings attached. And always Martha was there. We had dinner together twice a week. Her health improved now that she no longer skipped medications to save money, now that she wasn't picking up extra tutoring shifts to cover expenses. She had retired finally, but still volunteered at a literacy program, her love for books spilling into the lives of children who needed her patience and gentleness. One evening, as we sat on her porch watching the sky blush pink and gold, she leaned back with a contented sigh. "You know what amazes me most, Cassie? How differently everything could have turned out if you'd announced your lottery win right away." I smiled faintly, considering the alternate reality she conjured. They would have swarmed me. Overnight, I'd have become the favorite daughter, the generous sister, the treasured niece. They'd have shown up with smiles and open arms, not out of love, but out of expectation. "And you'd never have known what was real," Martha added quietly. She was right. Painful as the experiment had been, it had freed me. Their rejection had hurt, but it had given me clarity. Without that clarity, I might have handed my fortune to people who saw me as nothing more than a bank account, and in the process, I might have lost myself. The greatest lesson hadn't been about them, it had been about me. Before the lottery, I had defined my value by what I could give away. I had lived as though love were a currency earned through sacrifice. I let myself be drained believing that was what family meant. But now I knew better. Real love, the kind Martha gave me, didn't tally debts. It didn't vanish when giving was inconvenient. Real love remained. The lottery hadn't changed who my family was. It had simply revealed it. It hadn't created greed or coldness, it had illuminated what was already there. And in the same way, it revealed something inside me I hadn't recognized: resilience, strength, the power to choose a life not dictated by desperation or fear, but by clarity and purpose. Now, when I look at my reflection, I don't see the woman who begged for scraps of approval. I see someone who knows her worth. Someone who doesn't need to explain or justify her boundaries. Someone who finally has peace. Peace. It's such a simple word, but for most of my life it felt unreachable. My days used to be defined by anxiety about money, about approval, about whether I was enough. Now that endless tension has loosened its grip on me. I no longer live calculating every penny, no longer twist myself into knots trying to earn scraps of love from people unwilling to give it freely. Instead, I've built something solid, something true. Sometimes I think about the night I first checked those numbers, about how my heart raced as I realized what they meant, and about the fear that came immediately after. I used to think the fear was about money itself, the responsibility, the risks, the secrecy. But looking back, I understand it was never about the money. It was about people, about how money would expose the cracks in my relationships, how it would magnify the betrayals I had already felt. And I was right. It did expose them. But it also revealed something else, something more valuable than any jackpot. It revealed who I am when I'm no longer living for their approval. My family still drifts around the edges of my life. My mother calls occasionally, her voice polite, sometimes tinged with guilt she'll never name. Lisa sends Christmas cards with photos of her perfect children smiling in matching sweaters. Jason pops up from time to time with hollow apologies and vague promises about getting his life together. I don't cut them out completely. I don't need to, because I've stopped expecting what they cannot give. They see only the surface: a woman who turned things around with a new job. A woman who somehow carved stability out of thin air. They don't know the truth, and they don't need to. Keeping that secret isn't about punishing them, it's about protecting myself. Protecting the fragile peace I fought so hard to build. But Martha knows, and Charlotte, and that's enough. Sometimes Martha teases me, saying I've become her mystery millionaire niece. But mostly we don't talk about the money. We talk about her students at the literacy program, or the book she just finished, or what flowers we should plant next season in the garden. She still lives, simply still delights in little things, still shows me every single day that love doesn't measure itself in dollars. And Charlotte, she keeps me grounded. She reminds me that even with everything I've built, I am still just Cassie, the woman who laughs too loudly over wine, who cries at movies, who once clipped coupons at the grocery store to make ends meet. She never lets me forget who I was before, and I treasure her for that. The nonprofit continues to grow. We've expanded beyond the city, reaching elderly people in nearby towns. Each time we help someone, each time we step into the life of a forgotten soul and remind them they are seen, they are cared for, I feel like I'm redeeming something. Not just for myself, but for all the ways family can fail us. Because family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up quietly, consistently when you need them most. I think back often to the moment Martha slid that envelope across the table, $3,000 she could barely spare. She didn't know I had millions. She didn't know it was a test. She just gave. Because that's who she is. And in her giving, she gave me the clearest picture of love I've ever known. The lottery gave me money, yes. But the real prize was clarity. Clarity about who I could trust. Clarity about what I deserve. Clarity about the kind of life I want to live. And maybe that's the lesson I hope you carry with you from my story. That true relationships are not measured by what you have to offer, but by who stays when you have nothing left to give. If you're listening to this and thinking of someone who stood by you when the world turned its back, cherish them. And if you're thinking of someone who vanished when you needed them most, let that truth free you. Don't waste your life begging for love that should be freely given. I once thought winning the lottery would mean freedom from bills, from debt, from struggle. But now I know the real freedom is this: the freedom to stop chasing the approval of those who never deserved my loyalty. So here I am, Cassandra Wilson, once the overlooked daughter, the forgotten sister, the underestimated accountant, now a woman who found her worth not in millions, but in the rare and precious people who proved their love when it mattered most. And if my story resonates with you, I hope you'll take a moment to reflect on your own life. Ask yourself who has been your Martha and who has shown you who they truly are when giving became inconvenient. If this story touched you, please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe for more stories that reveal the truths we often keep hidden. And most of all, leave a comment below. I want to hear your story. Because sometimes sharing our truths is how we find the family we were always meant to have. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the strength to see the truth even when it hurts.